Howdy YouTube, how's it going? It's King and Grandpa back at it again. Grandpa wanted to share with me today something about winter driving, so what do you got to tell me?
Well, my last run, the one I just got back from, I went through some winter driving, and I thought, well, it's a heck of an opportunity for me to explain some things to you and to other drivers. Other people will probably find this interesting as well. This is the season. We're starting to get into winter.
Yeah.
Now it's through some snowstorming, and actually they even closed some of the roads behind me that night. There's no chain ups yet. It was nothing, risky. I actually quite enjoyed it. But I want you to see the video footage.
Yeah, okay.
And I sort of explain things as we're driving. And so pay attention to what I have to say.
Okay.
But then after you see the video footage, we're going to have a little chat. And we're going to talk about some things that I know a lot of drivers would find good to know.
Alright, sounds good.
And, of course, especially you,
Yeah.
preparing you to be a new driver.
Yeah. Alright, well, shall we get into it?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's do it.
Well, it's winter time. Time of year when you really got to use a lot of common sense. It's when safety becomes even more important than getting the load there on time. We just passed a sign that says it's icy here. Well, it can be. The road's not shiny. But I don't see any snow or water splashing up from my tires. I'll have to pay attention to that next time somebody passes me. Now, there's not a lot of traffic here, so it could be really slippery. Just going to test my brakes a little bit here. You gotta be careful doing stuff like that, but there's no ditches, ditches on either side. Anyhow, my brakes seem to work reasonably well. The speed limit's 55. I'm not going to do 55. There's just no reason to. I think we're pretty much driving like wet pavement, but it can be icy before you know it. It's a good idea to slow down a bit. I mean, I'm peaking at 50 miles an hour. I'm dropping down when there's traffic, or like when that fella just drove by me. But you got to go at a speed that's comfortable for you. I mean, if you're comfortable at 30 miles an hour, you need to go 30 miles an hour. It's really, this particular drive really isn't bad at all. Apart from taking a little longer than it normally would. I'm slowing down for the corner coming up here, just in case it's icy. There's a car coming, I want to watch. Now if you look at his tires, there is water coming up, so it's slushy. Can still be quite slippery, especially when you get films of snow like we're starting to see here. I'd probably slow down even a little. Yeah, when it starts getting snowy like this on the road where it's starting to build up, it can be really slushy and it can be really quite slippery. I mean, I'll slow down in this stuff, maybe down to 45. But like I say, if you're not comfortable doing 45, slow down to whatever you're comfortable at. If you're working for a reputable company, they're not going to have any problem with you slowing down to a comfortable speed. I kind of like winter driving, you know, other than the fact that you've got to drive a little slower, and sometimes you have the extra work of chaining up. But I like all four seasons. I like the snow on the trees. This morning it was sunny out and the snow was melting. So yeah, it's getting a little snowier on the road, and the snow's sticking a little more. So personally, I like to slow it down even a little more. And every now and again, when there's nobody around and you're on a flat surface, you can test your brakes a wee bit. Because sometimes on this type of road, before you know it, it's icy and you're driving on basically a skating rink. I see there's somebody behind me right now, and he probably wants to get by me. He might be more comfortable with this type of driving. Maybe he lives in the area. I'm going to watch for an opportunity to let him pass me. He caught up to me fairly quickly, so he's obviously going a lot faster than I am. There's no reason to frustrate him. I'm going to make sure that he can see what's ahead. I'm going to hug to the right, so if he does decide he wants to try and pass me, he can have a look without actually crossing the line. He can have a look down my left. Here's a snowplow. Good to see that they're out there, the maintenance crews. Now this guy is going slower than I am, so I'm catching up, but I'm not going to get any closer than I really need to. And I'm not going to rush it. It's starting to slow pretty good right now. May as well just be safe. Oh! There was somebody in front of him turning off, and I guess that's possibly why he was going slower. It seems to be an RV pulling no, maybe not. Yeah, it looks like it might. Well, it's an RV with a tailgater, I think. Tailgating is just not a good idea in this weather. If I slammed on the brakes here, this truck would break into a slide. There's no doubt about that. So I like to leave lots and lots of room in front of me. If something happens and those guys start sliding around up there, I want to have lots of time to gradually bring myself to a stop before I get to them. See, that car isn't tailgating like he was a few minutes ago. But we are going downhill and on a corner. Now when you're braking on a hill like this, or on any hill, the idea is you know, choose the speed that you want to go downhill. Right now I'm doing 30 miles per hour. Actually, that's as fast as I want to go. I'm probably going 25 to 30. So 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. Now I apply my brakes to bring me down below that target speed. bring me down to about 25. Now it is winter, so the brakes don't heat up as badly as they do in the summer, so I can ride them somewhat, but I have to be careful about engine braking, because engine braking can cause problems going downhill when it's icy, because the truck wants to slow down but the trailer wants to keep going. So in this type of weather, when it is cool out, you're probably better off to ride the brakes a bit, but don't go fast. I mean, there's a big difference between riding the brakes if you're going 25 miles an hour than if you're going 45 miles an hour. Now I am using a little bit of engine brake here. Now the car behind me is following a little closer than he should. But you know what? That's his own decision. I mean, I'm probably not going to be slamming to a stop or anything, but it's just so much better off to leave some distance. This is quite a big hill. I don't actually have my engine brake on, but it is geared down. Okay, now I put my engine brake on again, just lightly, because I was going over 30 miles an hour again, and I don't want to go that fast down here. There's just no need to hurry. Especially on a road like this, because on my right is a drop-off. If I go over, this truck is rolling and tumbling. Well, what'd you think?
I thought it was, well, last year when I went with you in December, we had some similar experience with that weather, and I noticed too that it was icy in some spots. It was quite icy actually all over the place, because it was, what, -20?
Well, last year when you rode with me, it was in the heart of winter. It was real winter driving. What I wanted to do here was introduce you to, you know, like tips.
Oh yeah, tips.
Again, as you're going into the winter season.
Okay, yeah.
And, you know, I hoped you caught some things. I'll try asking you some questions.
Okay.
Okay. Number one, what do we do about road speed when we're driving in, when it's winter and possibly a little slipperier?
You're going to want to go a comfortable speed, but also stay somewhat under the speed limit, and at least, if not do that, do at least the speed limit, but not over, because there's just no need to.
Yeah, you're going to take a little extra caution.
Yeah.
Okay, what about tailgating?
That's not a good idea for one. Also, if the guy in front of you stops all of a sudden, you're going to need time, especially if it's icy, because there's no way a semi is going to stop that quickly in ice and slush.
Right. Now the other thing too, which I should have mentioned on the recording, was if there is somebody in front of you and he's a ways up there, you can watch and see if he starts slipping around.
Yeah, that's actually pretty smart, yeah.
I have a few times you run into black ice.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you're on black ice. You watch the guy that's up ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's starting to slide around, those tail lights are going all over. And then you just gently put on your brakes to see if they are slowing you down.
Well, one of the biggest things which you see often with some new drivers is they think when they start sliding and slipping over, they just nail on the brakes, which is not a smart idea, especially when it's icy out.
Oh, yes. And that brings me to a couple of other things.
Mhm.
There are some switches on the dash.
Yes. Okay.
One of them is your traction control.
Yeah.
Now on my Freightliner, it says ATC, and I'll show a picture.
Okay.
I'll add it to this video so
Yeah.
that the viewers know. On some trucks, it's labeled mud and snow.
Yeah. Okay.
On other trucks, it's just called traction control, or
Okay,
TC. On mine, it's automatic traction control. Now, a lot of people don't understand what it's for. If you read the manual, it says it's for slippery conditions such as deep snow or mud.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but that's not for driving conditions. That's for when you're in a parking lot.
Like the
and
yard.
people don't understand it. It's you pull into a rest area, you wake up in the morning, there's a foot of snow around you.
Yeah.
It's to get you through that 12, 18-inch snowbank.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
It's not for driving on the highway. Automatic traction control, what it does
Mhm.
is it pulses the brake on
Yeah. Okay.
when a wheel starts to spin
Okay. I
to
see.
keep it from spinning.
Fair enough.
And that's good. Like if you're driving up a steep hill and it's a little bit slippery,
Yeah.
and the guy in front of you stops to a slow down, maybe he's got summer tires on and he can't go, and
Yeah.
you got to stop. When you start again, you don't want those wheels spinning.
No. No.
You
No.
want the traction control to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's to control the traction when you're climbing a hill.
That. Okay. That's,
Especially when you're climbing a hill, even when you're stopped and going to a start. But it's for the highway, so you don't touch that button unless you're in a parking lot
and you need to move around the yard.
and you need to, or moving around the yard.
I know last year he was telling, Grandpa was telling me in the yard, it was all snowy and some of the trucks have super singles on them, and I think there was one guy slipping around everywhere, wasn't there?
Yeah. Some of the guys with super singles. Now, super single is a wide base tire. Instead of having two tires, you only have one, and they don't have the good traction that you might get out of two aggressive tires.
Yeah.
A lot of the traction comes from a tire from the edges of the tire. It's like little wings that flap
Yeah, fair enough.
into the snow. And yeah, we had guys that were bobtailing with nothing on the trailer, and they couldn't get anywhere in a parking lot because it was slippery and icy. In a case like that, you can shut off the traction control, but on the highway, you don't touch that button.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now the other thing and it's funny because I've actually had a couple people ask me about this recently. What about the locking axles?
Yeah.
Now, when I started with Challenger, our trucks had just one button, and
Interaxle.
the interaxle, and you can see it on the video. I'm going to add it to the video here so that you see which button I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that was what we had to help in slippery conditions. Now, that button, what it does is it locks so that it locks the front axle to the rear axle. Now, without that button, it is actually possible that if one wheel's on ice, it'll spin.
Yeah, well,
And you won't go anywhere. It's actually possible. What that button does is it will make sure that you have at least two wheels that will spin.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So it doubles your traction.
It's pretty much four-wheel drive, it almost seems.
Yes, when you have a four-wheel drive car or truck,
Yeah.
truck or my small SUV has this, it locks it. It locks that, it has that feature. It locks the front axle to the rear axle.
Yeah.
So you got a minimum, so you can, it's possible to only have two wheels spinning.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay? Now, all of our new trucks have at least one front locking axle.
Okay.
Now mine, I got really lucky with mine.
Yeah.
I have two locking axles.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Now, essentially, if you do the interlocking axle,
Yeah.
or the axle interlock,
Yeah.
you will have a minimum of two wheels that will spin, that will be
Yeah.
locked you will have at least 2 wheels that'll spin. If you lock the first axle as well, you will have a minimum of 3 wheels
That will spin.
that will spin.
Okay.
Now, 3 out of 4 drives, that's getting pretty good.
Yeah. That's,
And that's why most of our trucks only have the one locking axle, because 3 wheels is getting pretty good.
yeah.
Now, I also have the rear locking axle, which I absolutely love. It will ensure that all 4 wheels will spin no matter what. So
Okay.
if one's on ice, the other 3 are still going to spin.
Huh. That's
Okay.
actually really cool.
With only the front one
Yeah.
locked, if one wheel is on ice, you're only guaranteed that 2 other wheels will spin.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now with just the interlock locked, if one wheel is on ice, you'll be guaranteed that another wheel will also drive the vehicle.
Well, because anytime a wheel's spinning, it's trying to find the one that's the easiest to turn. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Power's going to go to the wheel that's easiest to trip or
Yeah.
to steer or to drive, to spin.
Yeah.
And that's why if you have no locks on, if one wheel's on ice, it's possible that that one wheel is just going to spin and the other wheels won't do anything.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so with one button pushed, you get at least 2 wheels spinning. So
Okay.
if one's on ice,
Yeah.
another one is also going to be driving it.
Okay.
With 2 buttons pressed, you get at least 3 wheels spinning.
Okay.
With one on ice, you'll get 2 others that will drive.
Okay. Yeah.
And then if you have a system like mine,
Yeah.
where I can lock the back axle,
Yeah.
if one wheel is spinning, the other 3 are going to be turning too.
That's
And I
getting
can
pretty
just
fancy.
about climb a tree with my truck.
That's getting pretty fancy.
Yeah, I love it. I'm really, it's nice to have. I love it in the winter. Now, so you got an idea how those switches work?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So if one is on, then one's on ice, the other will be spinning, and if 2 is on, then 2 be driving while one's on ice, and then if all 3 are on, then all 4 will be moving, or well, if one's on ice, then all 3 will be moving.
The other 3 will also be.
Yeah,
moving.
exactly. Yeah.
So, it's a heck of a nice system. Now, the next thing is how do you use it?
I know you're telling me there's one that you don't want to have when doing tight turning because your truck doesn't steer.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. If all 4 wheels are locked together and
Yeah.
you steer the wheels,
Yeah.
it wants to go straight.
Yeah, fair enough.
So you certainly don't want want them locked when you're just driving down the highway. If it's
Yeah.
well, whether or not it's slippery, you don't want them locked
Yeah.
when you're just driving down the highway. Or even worse, coming down a hill.
Yeah, yeah. You're
Right?
not going to be steering.
Yeah. With all 4 wheels locked together, it's going to want to go straight. It's going to, even if the front wheels are steered, it's going to want to keep going. That's the thing. People don't understand when to use those. And I know that there are a lot of drivers out there, some of them have been around a long time and they're doing this. They leave them locked in the winter, and you don't do that. There's for one thing, you can do mechanical damage to it. Maybe have a talk with your service guys if the company that you work for has their own technicians. Ask them about it, but you don't leave those on in the winter. The interlock, the axle interlock, and the front drives lock if you have that, and
Yeah.
the second drives that lock if you have that as well. You don't leave them on. In fact, the only time you use those
Yeah.
is when you're driving on the road and you're climbing a hill and it's slippery. Now, sometimes it can be a little bit slippery and the guy in front of you has bald tires or something,
Not.
and then he starts spinning out, and if you stop, you're going to have a hard time starting because it's slippery and you're uphill. Well, that's where locks come into play.
Now.
So if I'm climbing a slippery hill or a hill that looks a little bit slippery,
Yeah.
I'll lock, well, usually I just lock the first one and the second one. Sometimes I'll even lock the third one, but usually if it's that slippery, I should have chains on. Where I have used them, I've used them a couple times I've used them in one time in Montana. It was snowing like you wouldn't believe. When I woke up, there was probably, I don't like to exaggerate, but somewhere between 12 and 18 inches of snow around my truck. And I was in a rest area, and I just locked my axles, drove right out of there.
Yeah, okay, now having 3 locking axles does not mean that you don't have to chain up. You still have to chain up. Just because you have 4-wheel drive doesn't mean anything.
Chaining up, yes, no, it's for certain situations. Another situation, actually, that very trip that I was on, I got to the border, in Coutts, Alberta, coming into Canada.
Yeah.
And bit of a lineup at the booths.
Okay, yeah.
And there was one guy that was stopped, and he couldn't get going because there was only one path up to the booths.
Yeah.
Crossing the border.
Yeah.
And it had turned into ice with the trucks driving over it, the heavyweight. It turned into ice, and there was some fella. He was right in front of me. And the guy in front of him got cleared at the border, went through, and then it was his turn to go to the border, and he couldn't go anywhere. He was spinning out.
Oh, man, eh?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that was just after I got this truck.
Oh, that's even
And
better.
I hit the locks.
Yeah.
And, off to the side was 12, 14, 18 inches of snow. It was deep.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I just drove into there, and I drove around them, and the row of trucks behind me, they were cheering, honking their horn at. They weren't actually, but they were pretty happy because I made a path. I was able to do that because, like I said, I got 3 locks.
Yeah, exactly.
And I had them all locked. I drove around them, and I made a path through the deep snow, and everybody was able to get around that. Now, I couldn't have done that unless I had all the locks.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
One of them, I might have tried it, but I probably would have ended up chaining up because it was deep snow.
Fair enough, yeah.
But yes, you made a very good point. They're not a reason not to chain up.
Yes, exactly.
You chain up for a couple of reasons. You chain up to make it easier to go uphill. But you also chain up
to stop from sliding, I'd feel.
when you're going downhill.
Yeah, okay.
In certain conditions, they'll have you chaining up going downhill, and they'll have you put a chain on your trailer as well.
Yeah.
They call it a drag train to keep it straight.
Yeah, okay, it makes sense.
So back to these switches. Okay, you understand the interlock?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And the front axle lock and the rear axle lock, you understand those?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm sure I'll get more of it over time, but...
Okay, so when do you use the locks?
You don't want to use all 3 going downhill because your truck just won't steer. They're good to use when going uphill and it's slippery, or moving around the yard, or if there's a lot of snow around you.
Yeah, like if you're in a parking lot, some of the brake checks, I've been in there, in a brake check, and the snow's coming down like crazy, and they got, 10, 12 inches of snow, and, you use them in situations where you would otherwise be stuck.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
Okay, you don't use them at all going downhill.
Yes.
Now, I have once in a while turned, a couple of them on, and then later, oh shucks, I forgot to turn them off.
Mm-hmm.
It's not life-threatening.
Yeah, okay.
If you forget to turn them off, but avoid leaving them on. Only use them when you need them. When you need traction in your drive wheels, like going up a hill.
Yeah.
Or in a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Then
they're good.
Then you use them. Mm-hmm. But as far as typically driving, you don't want to leave them on. It's actually safer not to use them.
He was mentioning also when he was driving not to use your engine brake when going downhill because it slows the truck down but doesn't slow the trailer down because if the trailer just wants to keep going, especially if it's slippery out and the truck's slowing down, it's probably not a good idea, I'd assume. Right.
And the same goes with the engine braking. Avoid using it if you're going downhill. Now, I was on wet pavement. I had already tested my brakes.
Yeah.
And I knew what I was on, and I did use the engine brake on a low setting. Now, I had also talked about riding the brakes.
Yeah.
Now, I've talked to you about this a couple times. What do you know about riding the brakes going down a hill?
Well, for one, in the summer you don't do it because it's just gonna heat up within, I don't know, a minute or two. It'll be hot.
Yeah, they get really hot in the summer.
In the winter, it's okay because it's cold out, so they won't get as hot as fast. One thing about that is the reason to ride the brakes, because if you just nail on the brakes, the truck's just gonna slide, especially if it's icy out. So riding them will slow you down, but it's not going to lock up your tires, especially if it's icy out.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, your engine brake slows down your truck, but not necessarily your trailer.
Yeah.
So in the winter, you're better off not to use it. Now there's another thing too. If you are riding your brakes, they're going to heat up a whole lot quicker if you're doing 50 miles an hour or 80 kilometers an hour than if you're doing 25 miles an hour or 40 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
So you can ride them a lot, well, actually a lot more if it's one, cold outside.
Yeah.
And two, if you're going a lot slower to begin with.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And you should be all right. You will be all right, if you're not going too fast. But in the summertime, if it's, 80 degrees out,
Yeah.
and you're traveling at 60 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour,
Oh yes.
and you're coming down a big hill, and you're riding them brakes,
Yeah.
your wheels are going to be smoking.
Yeah. They'll be glowing red by the time you get to the
They
bottom.
will, yeah, and that's a big issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's some things you need to understand about riding the brakes.
Well, one thing with his truck is he has disc brakes all around, and some of Challenger's reefer trailers have disc brakes. So in the summer, if they get hot, they're not like drum brakes; they don't fade like they do. So braking, going downhill, you still don't want to ride them, but if you have disc brakes, it's not going to be as bad as if you had drum brakes on your truck.
Yeah, the problem with a drum brake is when it gets hot, it gets bigger,
Yeah.
and the shoes can only push out so far.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Right? So if it's too big, the shoes can't even contact the drum.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what happens when it gets hot.
Yeah.
With a disc brake, when the disc gets hot, it gets bigger, but the pads can still
Yeah, contact it.
So they are a lot safer, but things can get really hot.
Yeah.
And, things can melt, things can, so you still, even with disc brakes, you still want to avoid it, but boy, oh boy, disc brakes are just so much nicer to have.
Yeah, it's
And it's nice to see that more outfits are they're buying the new trucks with disc brakes.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, technology's come a long ways, and the drum brakes work well also. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. So we've covered the switches.
Yep.
We've covered the traction control, right?
Yes.
So when do we use traction control?
Not the locking axles. The traction.
The first button we talked about, the mud and snow.
Going around the yard, don't use it when you're driving.
Yeah, don't use it when you're driving. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right.
Yeah.
You ignore that button other than if you're in a muddy condition.
Yeah, and you're in a
deep snow, basically a parking lot somewhere.
Yeah, like the yard or truck stop or something.
Yeah. And that's that's it. A rest area.
Yeah,
snowed
exactly.
overnight. Yeah. Well, that's good. Was there anything else on there?
I don't think so. I think that was probably it. Anything else you have to share?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you guys like this kind of training, you like the video, subscribe. We'd love it. Subscribe and put on there that you want to be notified. Click the notification button.
Yeah.
And like it. If you like it, that's good too. But really, the big reason why I'm doing this is so that King learns how to be a professional driver, and any of my colleagues that are, I think it's good information, and I'd like to pass on what I know. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. that's it for now. So be safe.
Be happy.
You guys have a good rest of your day. I'll catch you in the next one.
Dr. Maywood and the members of his office staff, all of whom were unable to identify the body of James Lindsay.
Wow.